Ba-na-na-na, bum, 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 ba-na-na-na, ba-na-ba-na, bum, bum, ba-na-na-na. Ooh, you're my little pretty one, my little pretty one. When you gonna give me some time, Serena? Ooh, you make my motor run, my motor run. Gotta get it off the line, Serena. Never gonna stop giving up. Something in my own to get enough. For the time, I'm gonna come, my, whoa, my, Serena. Darkest reading horror, sci-fi, and J.K. Abrams fan. Drew here from Horror, Sci-Fi, and Beyond, and I'm sorry that you have to endure my terrible singing. But I just had to. Like, I totally
I thought
forgot
it was
that
pretty
they
good.
sing.
I thought it was a pretty good rendition.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that, man. But
I wasn't going to join in, but I'm glad you did it.
yeah, I totally forgot that they sung My Sharona until I started listening to like a soundtrack playlist on Spotify. I'm like, oh, I gotta sing that for the intro.
Oh, for sure. I'd forgotten. I haven't probably watched this movie since I saw it in theaters, so it's been like over a decade. I could have swore that the last song, like during the credits, is My Sharona,
Yeah,
and
it
I was kind
is.
of like, it's the first. Well, I mean, the song that plays during the credits is what's
Don't
it
let me
called?
down.
Yes, "Don't Let Me Down" by ELO, and I
Mm.
was like, this. I swore this was My Sharona, and it kind of like Mandela affected me, like weirded me out. I was like, did I remember it wrong?
Well, they do ELO, and then they do they play the zombie movie that they're
The
made, which
movie, yeah.
I
And then
love
they do the
that.
Shirai Serrano. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, the zombie movie's great. It may be better than the last act of the movie, but
yeah.
we'll get into all that.
But yeah, before we get into Super 8, we got a few things we needed to address. First being which we got two housekeeping things we gotta get through.
Mm.
The first thing is we can't go throughout this and not address the 560 views on our first episode of MCU Look Back in the Room.
It's a good number.
Yeah,
It's a good starting point.
yeah, I was shocked. Like, I believe within the first 24 hours, like that became our highest grossing, like our highest viewed video. Like
Nice.
beating out
That's
Sweeney
good.
Todd was at right now, the Sweeney Todd one is 270 views.
Sounds like we just need to talk about Marvel stuff.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to become
Maybe that's all anybody
become
wants to hear.
well, I don't want to become a Marvel channel or
That's
show.
fair.
But hopefully it gives me enough if we keep getting views like that on MCU
Sure.
Look Back, I get enough traction where people start reviewing or watching my other videos.
Spills over into all the rest of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So be sure
So
to
yeah.
click those like buttons.
But yeah,
Subscribe.
and then even after that, my 6 second review of the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, Knock at the Cabin,
Mm.
got some pretty decent traction.
Nice.
So I don't know if
Nice.
it was based off of MCU Look Back or just people just wanted
Just
like
didn't know what Knock the Cabin was like. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
yeah.
people are just starting to tune
Oh
in now.
yes. So speaking of that, thank you for finally subscribing to me, you unsupported bastard.
I thought I had already done it. Like I got on there the other day because you were like, "Oh, it's kind of views." So I was like, "I'll go look." And I was like, "Oh, let's subscribe to the channel." It's been like 2 years.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, I saw mine. So that's really exciting. I can't thank you guys enough for I don't know how it happened. I don't know if it was staring or just people just watching over and over again. But
Mm.
thank you, because that really means a lot to me. Even though I'm only doing this part time as a hobby, I am trying to do this full time, and hopefully one day, this could be my career. I can get paid for this, and that'll be my
I
bread and
mean,
butter.
I think that's like everybody. I think everybody would love that goal, right?
Yeah.
Sit around talk movies all day.
The second bit of housekeeping that we got to get through is hopefully if the scheduling works out, our next video after this will be part 2 of the phase 1 of the MCU. In our MCU look back series, which would include movies like Thor, Captain America, the first Avengers, and then the original Avengers. Yeah, so that's if we get scheduling worked out. Because Jackson said he had to get a second job, so that might be a little tricky.
It'll be coming either way. It'll be
Yeah.
coming. So people should just keep an eye out.
Yeah. So at that's the next video. The video after that will be the in honor of the Oscars this year. Me and Eric are going to be talking about 4 performances that should have been nominated for Oscars. But so if
There's
the
a lot.
MCU, so if the second episode of MCU Look Back doesn't happen after this, then that's going to be the backup video. We're going to do that one next. So we'll just flip flop it. So you're not, waiting for a long time for content. So yeah, I'm excited for that. That'll be an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can already say, like, I don't know why Toni Collette wasn't nominated for
Oh
Hereditary.
yeah, that was complete bullshit. But
I'll throw that out there. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I actually did hear an interesting theory about that, but I'll save that to the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Teaser, a little teaser then.
Yeah. So with that out of the way, let's talk. This is the first time we're doing this year. We're bringing back horror, sci-fi, and fantasy media that we've been consuming. So since you're my guest, I'll go first, Eric.
So I haven't been watching a lot. But I will say that I finally got around to well, not finally. I finally caught up on The Last of Us, which is a pretty decent zombie show for HBO. I played the games, and they stick fairly closely to the games, but they improve on them a little bit. I've seen the first 4, which are all that's out.
No, I mean
right
the second game. Did you play it?
Yeah, I've played through both games. Yeah.
Okay.
Second game's great. A lot of people hate on second game because of some twists that come about midway through the story, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I digress. You should watch Last of Us TV show. It's really it's good.
I'm gonna cop on it too. At this time,
silly moments. Yeah.
Well, actually,
have you seen you've seen 3 and 4?
Yeah, 3 was really good. I don't know.
3's really good.
Really, my favorite because I really like 2 with that when they're in that building with the clicker. That was so cool. And then
oh yeah, no, that definitely gave me like video game it reminded me of the game a lot. I don't know. I really liked what they did with 3. But other than Last of Us, I don't know if I really watched it. Oh, I did watch Toxic Avenger the other day, which is a terrible movie, but I love it.
Yeah, it didn't age well.
So bad. It has not aged well. It is. There are some jokes that don't work well. It is trash from like audio to visuals to everything. But I don't know. I kind of love it. It's great.
Hank, the angry dwarf from Howard Stern in like one of the sequels.
Yeah, I think he's in the 4th one, which is really like that's one that's like, ooh, there's some jokes in there. I'm like, oh, that's not.
Oh, really? I mean, it's Lloyd Kaufman, so.
It is Lloyd Kaufman. But I will say, for the most part, sometimes kind of progressive, but not normally.
So some stuff I've been watching, and I got I usually just narrow it down to 2 highlights, but I got 3 because the last one is kind of special. The first one, I watched, as I mentioned before, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie. Just real quick, I don't think I've been this tense in a movie, through the whole movie since the Babadook. The chimpanzee scene in Nope definitely had me on the intimacy, but that was one part. The basement scene in Barbarian, had me tensed up. That was one part. This movie, as soon as it started, it had me on the edge, pretty much the whole time.
That sounds like a panic attack.
Yeah. No, I literally almost had a panic attack in this movie. I'm I'm not even kidding. That's how good this was.
Shyamalan's always hit or miss for me. So sometimes I think he's great. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't care for Old, but I thought Split was pretty good. I didn't care for Glass, but I really like Unbreakable.
This is definitely a hit.
Okay. I'll give it a watch.
Yep. Other movie I watched Megan, which was really good. I don't know if you saw it.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I heard good things. I hear it's ridiculous and funny and
I don't want to say it's on the level of so bad it's good, like
Mm,
a Birdemic or a Room,
mm-hmm,
but it's one of
mm-hmm.
those movies where it takes itself so seriously through some of it with this commentary, but it is so fucking ridiculous in other parts.
Okay.
And apparently, like Megan scares the crap out of my sister, which I find hilarious.
She is uncanny valley through and through. Like there's
Oh,
something awkward, weird about her eyes. I can't put my finger on.
and then the last one I want to just kind of highlight is a movie that was written by a friend of mine and a new friend of yours. He was on the Muppets Christmas Carol video, and
Hmm.
that'll be Mr. Reed Lackey. Back in the day, he didn't write the final like draft for this movie I'm about to mention, but he came up with the original story, and that would
Hmm.
be the Michael Biehn directed movie, The Victim.
Never heard of this
Yeah,
movie.
Reed Lackey from the Fear of God podcast came up with a screenplay for a movie called The Victim, directed by Kyle
Huh.
Reese himself, and starring Kyle Reese, Michael Biehn.
So Michael Biehn stars in it and directs it?
Yes,
Huh. Is it any good?
it's pretty bad.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you so after I watched the movie, because the reason why I even watched this movie was
Mm-hmm.
recently the Fear of God podcast had the 300 episodes, so they thought it'd be cool if they talked about
Nice.
the process that Reed went through with the
Mm-hmm.
victim, and
Mm-hmm.
his original conception for the movie was really interesting, and I really liked that. It's just Michael Biehn added all the other stuff to it.
Yeah.
So it's basically Reed came up with the original concept, and then he just
Mm-hmm.
he's got auction off and bought, and so like pretty much all
Right.
the stuff was like out of his hand at that point.
I mean, that's pretty cool though. I don't have any movies that I've written that are directed by or starring Michael Biehn,
Yeah,
even if I don't like them.
yeah, and he said he was such a nice, he was super nice because he could
Huh.
read the set. So I'll definitely send you a link to that episode.
Yeah, please do. I need
Yeah,
to
well,
listen
I
to it.
actually watched
Also
the
need to see this
victim.
Michael Biehn movie.
Yeah, well, it's on Tubi, so it's for free.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
it's not good, but
Okay.
I doubt a lot of it has to do with Reed and just it just
Probably not.
yeah, because like I
Execution
said, like
probably is like half the battle.
yeah, well, like I said, like Reed's conception of the movie was really interesting,
Mm,
but
okay. Yeah, send
any
me the podcast. I'll listen to the podcast, then I'll watch the movie. That way I'll appreciate it more.
you
Or
might
should
want to
I
watch the
watch the
movie.
movie and then listen to the
Yeah,
podcast?
because they get into like plot details.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll watch the movie first, then listen to the podcast.
Yeah, well, I
I'll
just
do it.
gotta say, there's a lot of sexual stuff in the victim, and when I found that out, I was pretty shocked. I'm like, Reed, you're getting a little raunchy, but he actually meant that all that stuff got added into the movie, like that.
Added into it.
Yeah.
Michael Biehn, you horn dog. Filthy.
I'm sure Reed is gonna appreciate this when he sees.
Maybe. Or he'll excommunicate both of us and never talk to us again. Who knows?
I doubt that. Yeah, I love you,
You're
Reed.
probably
You're
right.
a fan. Anyways, just some quick honorable mentions. I watched that Shudder original movie, Deadstream, a lot of fun. Watched John Carpenter's The Thing because
Mm.
we had a lot of ice outside, so I thought it was appropriate. The
Hmm.
Last of Us was I don't want to put it in a highlight yet until I've seen the whole series.
That's fair. I
Yeah,
will say that it's so far what I've seen is worth you starting it. And if you don't like it, don't keep watching it.
yeah, I really
I think
liked
it's
it.
worth watching it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I got
uh,
nitpicks with it, but I got nitpicks with everything, so
yeah,
I don't really,
because you're a film snob.
I kinda am. I just got a lot of opinions, and I just
Yeah.
expect
I feel like
better of most people.
I feel like
And
our
movies.
relationship is like Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin from the Batman Beyond podcast, where I'm like Kevin
Mm,
Smith and I just like everything that we watch.
mm.
You're a little bit more critical.
Oh, I hate most things. Or not hate. I just got a lot of qualms with things, and I want to love
Right.
it, and it
Well,
makes me hate it more.
and then I also just been watching The Mandalorian, so
Mm,
a
mm.
lot of say.
I finally finished Andor. Really good. Andor's really good. it's a different take on Star Wars, which I think is great. So I'm excited to see what this new Mandalorian's about, season 3.
Yeah, I haven't watched any trailers. The only sort of trailer or anything I watched was like a TV spot during the Eagles game.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That their conference championships.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the only kind of thing I watched of it.
Nice. I haven't seen any of it. I have no idea.
But let's get to the Super 8 review. And real quick, I'm gonna start doing plot summaries so people get a basic idea of the movie we're gonna talk about.
Sure.
And spoilers, we always do spoilers in movies.
Sure.
But
We're gonna do spoilers now. We can get to spoilers.
we're not now, but I'm gonna do the plot
Oh,
synopsis.
eventually. Sure.
Yeah. So here's the plot synopsis for Super 8, according to IMDb. During the summer of 1979, a group of friends witness a train crash and investigate subsequent unexplained events in their small town.
Dun, dun, dun.
I love the opening theme to this movie. I love how it establishes so much.
You're talking
Basically,
about the sign at the steel mill?
yeah, it basically says, it's this many days, without an accident, and then they get changed out to 1 day, and then you find out that the person who's died is actually the main character. I think his name is Joel Lamb, mom.
It's Joe Lamb, I believe.
Joe Lamb.
No,
Okay.
wait, is it Joe Lamb or is it Joel? Now I'm confused.
I
Hang on.
think Joel the name of the actor. So he's all sad and he's sitting outside a like his swing set in his house, and
Mhm.
then we go into the house and we get introduced to his friends at the funeral dinner, I guess you can call it, and you find out that his friend Charles is making a zombie movie, and he basically said, "I bet Joe's not gonna want to do my movie anymore, because it's about zombie."
Mhm.
And they kind of joke around with that to kind of bring some levity to the situation. It's like, no, it's a zombie movie, you dickhead. You didn't want to do it, or
The
whatever
undead.
Charles
No
said.
one's undead. Yeah, right. No, this whole opening stuff, like everything really up until like the train crash for me is like pretty perfect. Like as far as casting, as far as like visual storytelling, like you were talking about with that opening sign, like you don't really need anything more than just that one person replacing that sign to
Right.
understand like what has happened. And no one has to say anything. There's no exposition. In a cheap movie, they would have done like VO, or it's like, I remember the winter my mom died. And so like it would have been really cheesy and bad.
Yeah.
And all this like you achieve all of that really quickly and really like efficiently, which is really nice. It's really great. Like everything really up until the train class is amazing.
Yeah. You just don't want that train crash, do you?
I'm fine with it. We'll get to it.
Right.
But
And
I
so,
got some problems with it.
yeah. So then it cuts to back to Joseph sitting outside his house on the swing set. A man pulls up in a muscle car, like very 70s, and he's even
Hmm.
dressed very 70s, with like the
Hmm.
like the cup like the tinted glasses, sunglasses,
Sure.
and he has
Thick
like his,
sideburns. Yeah.
yeah, long hair, and he got his like kind of like a button up shirt open with like a
Hmm.
white beater underneath.
It's nice.
Um,
It's nice production design.
yeah. So you drive into the drive-through or the driveway of Joe's house,
Hmm.
enters the house. Joe's father, who is a police deputy, takes the man away in his police car.
Right. After he tries to enter the house. So they're doing the wake and he
Mm,
goes inside. And then there's like a scuffle inside. We don't see the scuffle, which is also very nice. We kind of
mm,
catch it from Joe's perspective. And then throws him in the car and hauls him away. And that's the
right.
end. That's the end of that scene. He said something about there being a mistake. The guy who pulls up in the car, I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head, but like he's like it was a mistake or something like that. Basically alluding to the fact that his had some responsibility to maybe the death
Mm,
the of the mom, but we don't know what yet, which
right.
gets a little muddled later.
Yeah,
If
I
I'm
didn't
being
know that. The
completely
mistake.
honest,
It's in the
yeah,
mistake. That's
he
interesting.
says it was a mistake, which he doesn't say was an accident,
Mm,
which also gets a little confusing later because we'll get into it because the spoilers later down the road. I guess there's a reveal, but like
yeah.
there's some stuff in the third act that just doesn't quite
Yeah,
click together just
we'll get
right.
there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I just love like the chemistry with all the kids.
Yeah.
Even wrote down that like the kids and even like Charles' family, the director kid of this zombie movie that they're making, it feels very Spielberg like
Hmm.
Josh or Close Encounters where everybody's like kind of rude and yelling at each other and talking over each other. Which if you want the Blu-ray for Close Encounters, which I just bought, there's a
Hmm.
special feature where they with JK or not JK J.J. Abrams and Dennis
J.K.
Villeneuve.
Simmons.
Yeah, it's Abrams and Denis Villeneuve. And they're
Denis Villeneuve.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, French Canadian director.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they basically set them down and basically kind of they talked about how Close Encounters influenced them, and you can
Oh,
definitely
sure.
like Abram basically said like that was my family in Close Encounters, like everybody talked over each other.
Same with ET. The same, like there's very similar scenes in ET too, where they're like the family and the kids are all talking over one another
Yeah, and
at the dinner room table.
like going back to the whole Spielberg of it all, like you even got a little bit of that in the Fableman.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely pulling from Spielberg, definitely pulled from his own life. And that's kind of some of the problem I have with this movie is that it feels just like diet Spielberg. Like it doesn't, like E.T. is like a perfect movie. And so is really Close Encounters. And this one feels just like an homage to those movies
Mm-hmm.
without really saying anything or doing anything new sometimes, which not always has to be the case. You can still be entertainment, which this movie's very entertaining, but at the same time, it just feels like the Grindhouse movies that Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino made, perfectly fine, entertaining movies, but at the same time, they spent $30 million to make a piece of trash. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
people making those Grindhouse movies back in the day were trying to make it for whatever they could. J.J. Abrams essentially spent $50 million to make a Spielberg homage. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Right.
just some
And
stuff that's like,
I think what's interesting with you saying that was in my notes regarding like how like the kids interact with each other and like Charles' family interact with each other. I even wrote down that that's a big inspiration for Stranger Things, which
oh,
is derivative of Spielberg, but that's Spielberg y, but there's something different to it. What you're saying
yep,
with Super 8, it feels way too much like Spielberg.
way too much. Like they're not pulling from enough things. I wrote this in my notes later down. I was just like, this was a great. I really loved this when it was remade as Stranger Things because
Mhm.
this is basically the primer for that show. But like you were saying, Stranger Things just pulls from a bunch of different places, from like Stephen King, from Dungeons and Dragons, from like
Mhm.
Spielberg, and kind of mashes them
Stephen
all
King.
together. Which that show's a little uneven at times too, but at least it's
Yeah.
doing something different with it. Other than this, which is kind of
Yeah. Well, you gotta add in this the Stephen King in there too, and John
yeah.
Carpenter. Yeah, it's very
Right.
heavy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, like basically the Demogorgon's face just looks like that tongue that pops out of the dog in the thing. Like
Oh
where they're down there and
God.
it opens up. Yeah, that's what the Demogorgon looks like. There's
Right.
just pulling from a bunch of different places and kind of mashing them into something that's like a little bit new, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I still love this movie. I think it's a lot of fun.
It's
But
a lot of fun. I like this movie. I don't love it, but
yeah. I mean, I kind of like Stranger Things more because I feel like, and I'll get to this later, but
sure.
I feel like it feels like a more of a homage, like a love letter to all things like nerdy, like sci-fi and horror and comics and all that
Yeah,
stuff, where
right.
the kids are actually talking about that. But okay, we'll get to that later. So in the restaurant scene with Deputy Lamb and Joe, why does Deputy Lamb think sending his son to baseball camp will help both of them heal from the pain of their mother's slash wife's death?
Well, early on, it's like the his best friend, his parents are talking at the wake earlier in the movie, and they're just like, it's like, oh, he's a good person, but is he ready to be a dad? Like he's just apparently it's implied that he has just been like probably wrapped up with his work, probably hasn't been a good role model father before now,
Mm.
maybe. And then now to raise a kid on his own, he's probably dealing with a lot, plus the death of his wife 4 months ago. So he probably just needs the break, and he really just wants to offload his kid for the summer,
Yeah,
which
that's
is really sad. Which they never pay that off. which is
Mm,
another problem I have with the third act of this movie. It's like they set up a bunch of emotional ties that they never pay off.
right.
That's really the first hour of this movie is really great, even with the train crash sequence, which is ridiculous. Even with that in there, the first hour is amazing. Up until really like Alice's dad crashes her car. Like everything up until then is pretty great. And I'm sure there's people out here who love it and they're like, oh, it's fine. And you can still enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
But mm,
I
go ahead.
no, I kind of saw that scene more as you with Joe running around with his friends making monster movies.
Hmm.
That's a fantasy world, and his father wants to get him back to reality because death is a reality.
Sure. Yeah, but I don't
Um,
think he's ready to deal with it either because he comes home and finds him like crying in the bathtub at one point. You know what I mean? Like sitting in the bathroom. So I think I think he's just trying to compartmentalize his trauma versus like deal with it. You
mhm,
know what I mean?
right. And
Like if he
another
can get rid of it, then it's not there.
Yeah, and another thing I kind of thought about was maybe the mom was very supportive of Joe using his imagination,
Sure.
much like Maisie Fableman in the Fablemans, or like
Hmm.
Joy Byers from Stranger Things. They're very encouraging for the other kids that be very active in their imagination, and so maybe with Joseph wanting to make monster movies, that was just a reminder for his
And
dad.
that's a great thought. I wish it was in the movie because as of right now, like there's nothing in there really. You just kind of have to infer, and you're kind of like, okay. They
Yeah,
never really deal with the elephant in the room, you know?
yeah. But I just gotta say, speaking of the kids making the zombie movie, I think
Hmm.
Charles is extremely convincing as a director. Like I can totally see him
Oh yeah.
be a big Hollywood director, and he was definitely my favorite of the kids.
He was your favorite of the kids?
Him and this explosive kid who's also in
Mm,
Goosebumps.
he wasn't Goose. I was trying to remember where I saw him before. Yeah, that's right. He
Yeah,
wasn't
Brian
Goosebumps.
Lee.
Chompers. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, all
I
the
love
kids are
that
great.
kid.
Like I think the kids really carry the movie especially when it struggles a bit, when the movie itself
Mm.
like struggles a bit to find its footing. Like the kids really keep it carried until the third act. There's some problems with them in the third act where they're just basically screaming at each other for long extended periods of time, and I'm just like, oh my God. Like they're not saying anything, they're just talking to talk sometimes.
Mm.
Like whenever they're running through the neighborhood, we'll jump. That's too far ahead. We'll get there.
Um, and I know you don't like this scene. I freaking love the train scene. I think that train scene is amazing. Like
Uh,
it is
I will
great.
say, hey, before we
It
get
is
to the train, real quick though.
unrealistic, but you remember this is produced by Stephen King, the man that directed the Indiana Jones movies. So go figure.
Right. So I did read an article about it after I watched it because I watched it yesterday. And J.J. Abrams wanted it to feel like it was from the kids' perspective. Like
Okay.
this is what they remembered it by. So it's real heightened. And I understand that. But at the same time, I'm watching it and going like, these kids are dead. Like there's no way they survived like that. It was like too intense for like the kids are crawling underneath the train station and then like a car just completely demolishes it. I'm like, they're dead. Like no way they could survive that. And then their car is fine. And then also the guy who was in the truck, he's fine. That run did it. He not only lives to talk to them, which I can kind of see, he's also alive much later in the movie, which also doesn't make any sense.
Oh yeah. I went to the military base. But did you know it? And
Where do you live?
I didn't know this because this after was till recently. But did you know who that was? The Gremlins
It's
guy.
the it's Professor from Gremlins.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
good, it's a good little cameo. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I watched it this time.
I love the part when in Gremlins when the bell rings and like all the kids leave and he's like lists like a bunch of suggestions for
Hmm. Hmm.
presents that the kids could give him, and he's like, if anyone wants to give me like a present or like Super Bowl tickets or anything like that.
Yeah, well, anything. Please love me. Please like me. Uh, Also, too, did notice this time. They make a big deal about the train coming by, and like
Mm,
it's production value. It's gonna add so much to the movie.
mm.
And then that shot, like they never see the train. Like the shot of Alice that's in the that they shot with the camera, like they're pointed like away from where the train is. Like they watch the footage back later,
Right.
so you never even see the train. So like their whole thing with like production value, like it's not even there.
Yeah, well,
Does that make sense?
I think Charles was kind of a little bit too ambitious at that moment. Maybe
Right.
he thought he had it pointed just right.
Mm, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
But I mean, I thought that,
They did rush to get it up and going.
and I get the production value that Charles was getting, but
Sure.
and I get you have to have this in in the actual movie that we're
Hmm.
watching, but the Super 8 movie, not the movie that
Hmm.
they're making on Super 8.
Oh, sure. Well,
Yeah,
it's not in the movie that they're making on Super 8.
yeah. Well, I get the train crash in the J.J. Abrams directed movies.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think I get that that's like the exciting incident of the
Sure.
whole.
No, I think the train crash is great. I have nothing wrong. I have no qualms with it being a train
Right.
crash that starts it.
But what I'm trying to get at is I think the scene that Alice and the other kid are acting in the movie that the kids are
Hmm.
making, I think the acting was way better without the train.
Oh, yeah, because they're just trying to yell over the train at that point. It doesn't make any sense. They don't even see the train. It's just loud. No reason.
Yeah, but what's interesting is here's what's interesting. The first take is amazing for the actual narrative of the whole movie that we're
Hmm.
watching.
Hmm.
But with the train, it feels better with the zombie movie that the kids are making because there's an urgency to it, to the dialogue.
I guess.
Yeah,
I That's why you always roll in the rehearsal though. That's what I say.
yeah, always record.
Always record. And that was harder back then because you had to actually buy feet of film, which a Super 8, I think a Super 8 reel was only like 3 minutes back then. So I think you could only run it for about 3 minutes at a time before you had to
Mm,
change out and flip over. Sometimes they were double split, so like it'd be 16 millimeter, but like split in two. So then you
right.
would take it out and run it back through the other way, and it'd be another reel. But it's
Mm,
crazy. It's crazy to think about only being able to shoot 3 minutes at a time.
right. So, did you at least like the gas station sequence?
I think it's exciting. I think it's an exciting sequence that I don't know why it's in the movie. Does
No,
that
you're
make sense?
creating drama. You gotta create like the
Right.
serious events. You gotta show these.
But why does he attack the people at the gas station? Why does the monster attack the people at the gas station? Their food, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like why is he could have grabbed them without like wrecking the entire, you know what I mean? Like he spends so much time later on. I assume it's a he, it may be a she.
Mm,
The creature spends like delicate time later pulling like engine batteries and everything out of cars and then closing the lids back down on them. You know what I mean? Like they came in and
right.
found him, but he's just like destroying this gas station. And like watching it this time, I'm really like, why is he like messing stuff up? It's an exciting scene, but
Mm,
in context, I'm just like he could have just like picked those people up. You know, he didn't have to
yeah.
like
Well,
destroy everything.
I think it was definitely a well constructed scene too because you had like the gas station attendant listen to Heart of Glass by
Oh sure,
Blondie,
yeah.
and then like the lights go off, and then you hear then before that you hear like this that the sheriff is outside pumping gas, and you hear the gas
Hmm.
thing go, and it slowly goes off, so you go beep 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 beep, and that's like classic horror movie moment
Oh
right there.
sure, no, no.
That sound.
It's super well staged, great and everything. I did wonder about this though. It almost seems like almost every movie with a some sort of creature from another dimension or a planet or something like that, they always affect the electricity.
Mm.
Like that's like every movie that has something like that in it for some
Well,
reason.
it's a big
And it
monster.
may not be every movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a big monster. They're knocking over the electrical box.
Is that what they never really touch on this either though, but like it's like affecting the electricity.
Mm.
It's not really like just knocking stuff over because it would just go out
Oh
if they lost
yeah,
power. You know what I mean? Like it's like sucking energy from it, and they never really address like what
yeah. That makes sense. Well, at
how it
least
can do that.
yeah. Well, going back to like Stranger Things season 3, when like the power goes out, that
Hmm.
makes sense because the Russians are experimenting
Right,
on.
right.
That makes
And
more.
granted, Stranger Things has like 10 episodes or 8 episodes to kind of like parse
Mm.
out some of these details, but like the problem with this movie, and we'll talk about it later. I'll talk a little bit about it now. Is that it starts too many threads and
Mm,
doesn't know how to tie them all up by the end.
right. That makes sense. Um, but then honestly, I think, um, with all that being said, with some stuff that didn't quite work, I think
Sure,
I
sure.
watched the special features from this movie way more than I actually watched the movie.
Oh, really? I've never seen any of the special features.
Yeah, because I love watching, like, especially the one about the kids. I love watching like the interactions with the kids.
Sure.
And
I
I can,
love special features too.
yeah, and I can kind of relate to that because I felt with J.J. Abrams' perspective, hanging out, with kids and trying to be like a role model or whatever. Because I worked at a church camp for a number of years, so I kind of felt like
Mm,
Abrams,
sure.
yeah, and just working with kids and building a bond with kids and like being being a good role model and
For sure. And like I was reading about this movie too and everything. And so like originally he had two different ideas, and one was about a coming of age story with
mm,
kids, and then the other one was a monster movie, and then he just decided to mash them both together. And I think this movie does feel just like E.T. mashed together with Cloverfield. You know what I mean? Like it works most of the time,
mm,
but it just can't quite get to where it's going sometimes. Like and all the
right,
kids stuff with the kids, back to all the stuff with the kids is great. Like everything with the kids, I'd watch that movie all day.
yeah, I think these kids are really cool. But I mean, I'm so used to the kids and Stranger Things at this point because that's
Sure.
going on for 4 seasons. With them filming on Super 8, I felt like it
Hmm.
may have been very, or even like J.K. Abrams talked about this. It was very reflective of how he made movies. 'Cause
Oh yeah.
he would buy film,
Hmm.
film whenever he wanted the film, send it off to Kodak or wherever it was, and then a
Hmm.
week later or whatever, he gets it back. So it became like routine.
Yeah, I read that J.J. Abrams actually worked for Spielberg when he was a teenager, like developing some old like Super 8 home movies and like short films and stuff like that for him. Which is like feels very circular when it comes down to this movie.
Mm. Yeah, that'd be like an honor to do that.
Maybe. What if he was really annoyed by it? Like he had to get an after school job and he was like, I guess I could deliver papers or I could just develop these crappy old movies for this old geezer.
But it's Steven Spielberg.
Maybe he doesn't know who Steven Spielberg is. Maybe J.J. Abrams lived in his basement in a cage for all of his childhood. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just speculating.
No, I'm pretty sure he was I'm pretty sure he grew up loving Spielberg movies.
Oh, I'm sure he probably did too. The majority of the movie works really well for me. I think the first hour is pretty great. Like all their setup for everything, it's very intriguing. We don't know exactly what it is. And then somewhere in the third act, like everything just kind of falls flat for me.
Yeah, I
And
felt
it's
like the
mainly
alien. Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead. Yeah.
I
No, you're
felt like
fine.
the alien was kind of uninteresting, and I want maybe a little bit more. But this is like coming out like when did Cloverfield come out like 08, 07. So this is like,
08, yeah.
yeah, so this is like a little far removed from that. And I feel like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I feel like I felt like the look of the alien felt too much like that.
Yep. No, and it's super uninteresting when you get to it and it's this movie just feels like E.T. meets Cloverfield to me.
Mm,
Which had been fine if we could have hit like our emotional beats at the end. Basically you've set up the movie, you've set up like a bunch of different threads that need to pay off where you've got like a father son who are at odds with each other because of a death. You've got like a father and another father who are at odds with each other because of that same death. You've got that daughter and father who are at odds with each other for different reasons because she wants to hang out and can't do that. You've
mm,
got a monster in there now who is sentient and can understand people's thoughts that we never really do anything with.
right.
And then you've got like the other kids in a monster movie. Like you just got a bunch of like emotional threads that they never pay off. Like they had that scene where the monster picks them up, and I read about it later. And like J.J. Abrams was wanting like I guess we get into spoilers now, but
Mm,
J.J. Abrams wanted the monster to represent like the trauma
mm,
of the mom's death, and that like him confronting it makes him understand or like letting go of that pain or letting go of like like the trauma of like losing a loved one, but I don't think it worked. It didn't come across like that. Like,
Mhm.
and there's no resolution with like the dad and the son. Like they just show up at the very end and they're just standing there and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I love you, son. We did it." And there's just like he's about to send you off like baseball camp. Like, like and then the daughter like they hug too, and it's just a bunch of like emotional beats that never get answered by the end of the movie. And I
Yeah.
think it's a real shame because the first hour is really good, and then the
Well, you
last
also got
hour is kind of like, eh.
you also got to remember that J.K. Abrams is infamous from for not bio marketing, but keeping
Hmm.
things a secret.
Sure.
Like a movie, like what Spielberg did with Jaws and I'm still in the Ark. Um,
Sure. I mean, with like Lost and like Cloverfield too. Like the first Cloverfield trailer was just like it had no title, had nothing. It just had the date, and like it was just that shot of like the Statue of Liberty's head like
right.
being thrown.
Yeah,
So,
and I feel like a lot of people's problems with it, and now like as I have with it, the fact that he in the trailer he built it up. This is gonna be something like you never seen before, or something like big. It's another Spielberg kind of movie, and I think if you take it by itself, moving the Spielberg out of it,
hmm,
it's a fun movie.
yeah.
But I think if you try to compare it to like Spielberg classic like A Close Encounter or Jaws or whatever, Raiders,
Hmm.
E.T.
E.T. Yeah.
Super 8's still a really fun movie and a fun homage, but it's definitely pales in comparison to all those other Spielberg movies.
Right. Right. Right.
I
And I
think
wonder if it had just not been like set in the 70s, if it would have played differently. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like if they'd said it in like the 50s or said it in modern times or something. Like it's just also too that the princess trope, the save the princess trope. I hate it.
really that didn't
I don't
bother me.
know why they didn't need it. They didn't need it. Like
Yeah,
there's so many contrived things
I
that
will
happen.
say after watching, after years of watching, like Raiders and Last Crusade and Jaws and all these other Spielberg movies, this this was a like we keep saying that, like not really anything super original, but
Hmm.
in a way it was a bit of a breath of fresh air because there was
Hmm.
some stuff in here I totally forgot about. Like I forgot that Joe hangs the lost dog sign on the wall and it pans out and there's
Hmm.
like a bunch of them everyone. I totally forgot that scene.
Oh
Compared to
sure. No, there's
Jaws,
some great like yeah,
yeah,
great visual storytelling in here. Yeah.
compared to like a movie like Jaws where I pretty much had that movie memorized because I watched it every
Right.
or Jurassic
Right.
Park, I had that movie pretty much memorized. So this is
Sure.
a somewhat of a breath of fresh air, even though it's not totally original. Because I don't
Hmm.
watch this movie a whole lot.
I've seen this movie once before. This will be my
Right.
second time watching it. Um, I remember it's about how I felt when I walked out of the movie theater the first time.
Mhm.
Um, it was fine, and I probably won't watch it again until someone asks me to watch it again.
Yeah, yeah. I need to watch it. I'll probably watch it. This is probably good. Maybe every 2 or 3 years kind of movie. I feel like.
That's fair. I
Yeah,
feel like I watched it. I feel like I enjoy it. Every time I watch it, I feel like I enjoy it in the moment, and then after the fact, I'm kind of like, okay, it's done.
yeah.
Probably not gonna think about this anymore. You know what I mean? Since we're talking about J.J. Abrams real quick, there are too many lens flares in this movie. Like
Oh yeah,
way too many lens flares in this movie. There's at points where they're like cutting off people's heads, and I'm just like, what is?
yeah.
Why? Why is it there?
I can get it where he's trying to make a nationalistic kind of look, but
Sure.
like yeah, it got real annoying here. Like I
Oh
think there's
man.
some good. I think there's some good lens flares, some really good ones in some of these movies. But like when it starts to like block people's faces, like I think that's getting ridiculous. I think that gets
And I
ridiculous.
will say on the other end of it, I think it works in Star Trek for the most part. I
Mhm.
think it's a nice way to separate visually from what they've done before
Mhm.
with like the TV show and with like all the movies before then. So like I thought that was fine for Star Trek, but like here it just like there's so many of them. And like the one I always think of is like when Alice is doing her like big scene and we're doing that push in
Mhm.
to Joe, and like there's a lens flare just like cutting through the other two kids' heads, like
Right.
like right through like where they're at. So they didn't even tell if they like it or not. I don't know. It's just that scene is always like, ugh, why?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you there. So before we get to our favorite part and least favorite part, and then the themes, and then we'll wrap this video or this episode up.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite joke in the whole movie is when the camera stop guy, is always really trying to get in good with Charles' um um sister,
Mm-hmm.
played by one half of Allie and AJ, and so like Charles gets the sister to flirt with the camera store operator so that they can
Mm-hmm.
get a ride to wherever the monster is. And the dude's like, so what kind of music is your sister into? And then Charles is like, I don't know, disco. And there's like a pause, and the guy goes, I could get into disco again.
I could get back into disco.
Yeah.
Like convincing himself of I really did like at that point in the movie I was kind of checked out because I was kind of like I kind of know what was coming.
Hmm.
But that I'd forgotten about it. It made me laugh really hard.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a good
that's a
moment.
pretty funny part. So now it's part of the show when we do favorite part or least favorite part. And it doesn't have to be like a
Uh,
moment in the movie, just be like an aspect of the movie.
doesn't have to be a moment in the movie, it can be a whole aspect of it.
Yeah. So that
I
yeah.
mean, I if I was being honest, like the first hour, I love the first hour and I hate the last 50 minutes. But I really love the kids. I think the kids are great in it, and I really love their movie that plays during the credits.
Oh
So stay
yeah.
for the credits if you're watching it. Like that is, it's really great. And there's some nice performances. There's some really good stuff in here. It just doesn't quite pull it all together in the end. Like they can't quite
Mm,
they gotta they made the leap and they jumped off and they just can't quite stick the landing.
mm,
But yeah, the least favorite part to me is really the creature. Like mainly because they kind of set it up as like almost being sympathetic, but then they don't really do that right, and then they set up that it
right.
can like be telepathic, and they never really pay that off really, and it's
Mm,
just like a bunch of things with it that are just kind of like half baked, ham fisted, and I'm just like, it could have been so much more. It's really like they wanted to do Day the Earth Stood Still, and they wanted to do Klaatu and Gort in the same body. You know what I
right.
mean? But they couldn't but they should have just been two like it should have just been two different creatures. It should have been
Mm.
like a monster that got out, and then there was also like this humanoid thing that was like hunting it and that was trying to catch it or something. I don't know. Besides the government, which is always done, like they always do the government in these movies. I don't know.
Right. I'm gonna say favorite part, least favorite part, or my favorite part is got to be the zombie film during
Mm-hmm.
the credits. I think that was just so much fun.
Yep.
Very Romero with like the cheesy dialogue and the bad acting and like the
Yes,
zoom
yes, it's
ins
great.
and like this the that was a lot of fun. Least favorite thing, I wish the kids would have talked more about pop culture kind of stuff like Star Wars and Star Trek, which would have been awesome because Jason Abrams' history with Trek and then his eventual history with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's one of the things I loved about Stranger Things is when they're out exploring a lot of this weird stuff, the Stranger Things,
Sure,
as
sure.
the title implies, that that they'll always will be like, oh, this is like Alien, or this is like 11 like Yoda from Star Wars, because like when you're with your nerdy friends, like you always talk about like stuff that happens in your real life, and you always say, oh, it's like this movie.
Sure, sure, sure. There was, and I've read about this too, is that there was a conscious effort not to do anything, reference anything Spielberg or
Mm.
Spielbergy. And so maybe they thought Star Wars was too close to that since Spielberg and Lucas were friends. Um, but they do make they reference like a few other more horror movie type things. So like Joe has like a posters on his wall. He's like painting like Wolfman or like Hunchback. I think it's Hunchback, yeah. So like they make a few references like that, but I agree, like there's not enough like kid stuff in here. Although the one kid saying mint over and over reminded me of being a kid a lot, like almost too much.
See what
And
over
just
and
like
over
getting
again?
fixated. I forget what his name is. The
Ryan
best
Lee.
friend. Yes. Him saying mint a lot,
Oh
where he's
no,
like,
no,
ah,
Charles
it's
said
mint.
mint a lot.
Yes, he said mint a lot. It reminded me of being a kid and like learning a new word and then
Mm.
just like saying it too many times. It made me
Yeah.
laugh.
So let's go to themes and we'll rank or rate this movie and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
So, what's the theme or some thematic stuff that you noticed in the movie?
I noticed that they do a lot of set. We'll go back to what I hate about the movie, but they do a lot of great stuff with like setting up themes of like loss and trauma and like
Mm.
dealing with that, whether you're a child or an adult, and it's like hard to overcome. And then they completely boggle the lane. They never pay any of it off. But then also too, like they deal in themes of like government control and
Mm.
like the idea of like manufacturing like a catastrophe, like all the setting the fire and like getting people to leave and all that sort of stuff. Or just like this sort of like manufactured catastrophe. But then also just like government overreach, they deal a lot in that too. Uh, there's just the young love and things like that, and basically they set up a bunch of things and just can't figure out how to pay them off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think
yeah.
honestly now, I mean, I do get your perspective, and I do agree with you. I just think my love of Spielberg and how much it felt very Spielbergian.
Hmm.
I felt like it kind of overshadowed a lot of the qualms for me
I
personally.
That's
Because
fair. That's fair.
I am a Spielberg like geek. Like I think like he's seriously my favorite director of all time.
Sure. No, and I would completely agree if we were watching ET. Like if we were watching ET, bawling my eyes out by that last shot.
Mm.
By the time they get to the spaceship lifting off in this movie, it's like I don't give a shit. I'm glad it's gone. At least that ugly ass monster's gone now. Like that's
I
all I felt
mean,
whenever it ends. You know what I mean? Like there
I
was
mean,
no
I wouldn't
there's no
say
emotional connection for me like caring whether it leaves or it stays or like they find their parents again. Their parents basically play no part in like there's no reconciliation. There's just so much like stuff that I just
yeah,
dislike.
I
Sorry,
wouldn't
go
say
ahead.
I didn't give a shit when the alien left. But it didn't give me that as strong an emotion like a ET.
It's an homage to Spielberg and not Spielberg. Because I think
Yeah.
Spielberg probably could have figured out a way to make you feel about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like Abrams and he hasn't done a lot of movies or directed a lot of
Sure.
movies, but he seems like he's a lot better with like kind of more like action, kind of fast paced movies, like more like a
Sure.
George Lucas.
Right. And that's why, like stuff like Star Trek or Mission
My
Impossible
three.
3. He did Mission
Yeah.
Impossible 3. Like those I think work really well. He's able to like balance those sort of like fairly cheap emotional moments
Mm.
with like pretty good action. And this movie, like in honesty, like the stuff where there's no action for like the middle of the movie, like from the time the 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 ridiculous train crash happens to the bus, like there's no real more action in there for the most part, other than maybe that like gas station scene. And I think all of that works really well. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
think maybe
think
someone else should have just did a draft of the script because they could have went like none of this makes sense at the end.
yeah, I feel like and we, of course did a whole big video of Brad Bird. I think he's a better throwback kind of director.
Sure,
Because
sure,
like
sure, sure. And I think right, go
as I
ahead. Sorry.
mentioned there, that with the Iron Giant had like the same like Spielberg like energy there, but it wasn't completely.
100%. Wasn't a complete ripoff. It did its own thing. And by the time the Iron Giant decides to sacrifice himself by flying up and hitting the
Yeah,
bomb, I'm like, oh, emotionally invested in it. I did not care about any of these people by the
yeah,
end of the
yeah,
movie. And
and
I should have, because they set it up that I should have. You know what I mean?
yeah, like I said, I agree with a lot of your points. I just think the Spielberginess of it kind of overshadows everything, and I mean I can't really add too much to the whole idea of like forgiveness and moving on. Joe doesn't see the alien as a monster, just like he didn't see Lewis, Alice's dad, as a monster.
Right. Which, another thing too, what did Alice's dad do to Joe's mom?
He and they even said this in the movie. Basically, he was super drunk.
Uh-huh.
He didn't come into his shift at the steel meal, and
Uh-huh.
so he ended up getting Joe's mom to go, but there was
Uh-huh.
some sort of accident there.
Right.
But they didn't really,
Uh
yeah,
yeah. and it doesn't feel quite as strong. Like if he was responsible for it, like it would make sense as to why they were mad. I don't know.
Mm.
Like once they start explaining, I'm like, that's why they're mad at him. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, they just didn't flesh it out enough. And like by the time he forgives him in the car, I'm like, no, he doesn't. They're just saying that so they can move past this and get to the monster stuff. You know
Yeah,
what I
that's
mean?
right. I'm like,
They never said it. They never pay any of that stuff off. Like they say the lines like there's where they're supposed to, but they never like build towards them coming to that understanding.
well,
You know what I mean?
it didn't make sense because like, did something happen that in the factory that was inevitable that was going to happen to Lewis?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's what it would have been. So then he would have been dead versus the mom, and I get it, that would have been like upset that he would have died, but some of it just doesn't like it doesn't feel as like clean. It feels a little muddy, and it I don't know. They don't really handle that very well.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, I do think, and I'm maybe in the same mindset. I think, and I keep repeating this. I didn't think Abrams might have been too much in the Spielberg mode, and then it really
Yeah.
fucked up the script.
Right. What would have worked, I think, for me is if he wasn't an alcoholic before the accident, and then after like he couldn't go to work because he called in, and then she ended up dying for it, and then he became an alcoholic and piece of shit because he couldn't get over it. Then it would give him an arc to do versus like already being kind of a jerk. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? And then feeling super sorry about it, but then they won't accept his apologies, so it drives him to alcohol. Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. There's
Or
just things that I
maybe what they
would
could
have
have
done
done
differently.
was he was an alcohol. He's always been an alcoholic. He stood up to work drunk, and then
Going to
he,
jail for murder at that point.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
So
I
I
think
mean,
that.
that's the other problem is like, does he either he kills her and goes to jail for the accident, which makes perfect sense,
Mhm.
or he doesn't become an alcoholic until afterwards. Otherwise, like it just gets real muddy in there, and you're just kind of like,
Well,
okay,
maybe he goes to jail, but then instead of cutting for 4 months, you cut to like maybe like a year or two later, or
sure,
however like the law system works in this small
right,
town.
right, or they couldn't prove it, or like. It was just rumored that he was drunk, but he was like, or he wasn't, but they think he was, or you know what I mean? Like they could have. But
Yeah,
they've got 2 hours, so they only have so much time, and they spend a lot of time with the kids. So I get why they like brush past it a little bit, but it feels like it's very important to these characters' emotions for getting over this trauma.
yeah, maybe it could have been like a newspaper thing that was like in the background.
Yeah, anything,
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. But anyways, what would be your rating for this movie out of five?
Out of five, I give it a solid 2.5 stars.
I give it a 3.5 stars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm between a 2.5 and a three. I think there's enough stuff in
yeah.
there, especially the first hour, that I think works really well.
Yeah, I
Um,
really like I said, the, I think the kids are strong enough. I
mhm.
think the concept is strong enough. It's just like what you said. A lot of stuff doesn't get fleshed out. I think the alien's a little
Yeah.
boring. They even mentioned the whole backstory with Joel and his mom. Um, which you kind of feel bad for the kid a bit, despite that
Oh,
not
sure.
making sense.
Yeah. You totally feel bad for the kid. And by the end, it should be that like the other dad has to like sacrifice himself to save
Mm,
Joe or something, or there was just the emotional connections between our four lead characters, between the daughter, the son, and the two dads. And like those two are kind of like bonding a love relationship, and these two guys are upset about each other and they want to keep apart. It's Romeo and Juliet, but we never get like someone has to overcome the thing in order for them to like either be
mm.
together or not be together, and then there's they just don't do any of it. They just show up at the end, and then you're like, oh, I
Right.
guess everything's fixed.
Yeah, and like I said, I think there's enough that's kind of burgy it's that make me want to bump it down to like a two, or that makes me want to
Mm-hmm.
bump it up to a 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's enough of that kind of Spielberg kind of feel to it
That's
that's
fair.
still enjoyable despite all that. I
I
can
would
overlook a
say
lot
that
of
if
that.
sure, and I would say that if you really wanted the Spielberg feel, I would just go for Spielberg because this is
Yeah, or Stranger Things.
J.J. Abrams, Giant Overmind. Yeah, or go with Stranger Things. Yeah,
Yeah, or Iron
which will
Giant.
last you a year. Or Iron Giant.
Yeah.
A perfect animated movie.
Yeah, I think Iron Giant's way better than ET because you have like the Cold War aspect to it. I feel, and I here's the thing about ET is I always tell myself that I respect ET. I don't love it, and
Mm,
then I go a year or two without watching ET, and then I watch it
hmm.
again, and then I'm like, oh damn it, Spielberg, you're making me love this movie.
I know, and it's like he
It's way
somehow
even though it's
tricks you into loving a puppet for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it shouldn't work. It
Well,
shouldn't
that's the
work,
thing
but
about
somehow
it
it
is
does.
why I love Close Encounters more than E.T. is E.T. feels more like a kids movie, but he did push it in that spell where you can't help but not love that movie.
Get caught up in it. Yeah, no, it's some tricky pulls on all of us. I don't know what it is.
But anyways, guys, I hope you liked this review. Hopefully, you didn't ruin this movie for me. Hopefully, I still kind of like this movie.
That's fair. I mean, you can like this movie. I like this movie too. It's just not my go-to for J.J.
Yeah,
Abrams or Spielberg. And so that's kind of like,
yeah,
maybe if I'm bored,
yeah. But
but
like
I
I said,
imagine it may be another 10 years before I watch it again.
yeah, like I said, I'm enough of a Spielberg fanboy where yeah, I can kind of overlook a lot of the stuff that you're saying.
Sure.
Or like the
And
saying that.
I love Spielberg too, but I'd just rather watch a Spielberg movie.
Yeah, indeed. But anyways, guys, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There should be a link to a playlist for more video movie reviews somewhere on this screen. I don't know where it's gonna be. Make sure you thumbs up this video and make sure you share this video because it helps out my channel. And make sure you follow me on Twitter and Facebook, and that'll be linked down the bottom. And this has been Drew from Horror Sci-Fi and Beyond. Over and out. Bye.